So want to welcome in our guest here for our MAPGA online series, Aaron Dill, Titleist Vokey Wedge representative and wedge designer. Aaron, how are you, man?
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you very much for taking time out. I know you got busy times and you're out there with Tori going on and everything this week. First off, just Aaron, give everybody a little bit of a quick version of um, sort of your role, just so everybody's sort of clear of what you do with the company and how you started with Vokey and with Titleist and Vokey wedges.
Yeah, so I think like most of the guys who are in this business, they fell in love with the game young. I did. My dad introduced me to it when I was little, and just couldn't get enough. And so as I grew up and I played more and more, started working at clubs and working in retail and working in driving ranges and learning how to teach and doing all that stuff. But fitting in equipment was ultimately the passion that I really wanted to seek out. And so there was a guy that I got to know. He was introduced to Steve Pelisek, who's our president here. And he said, "Hey, we've got this job called Fitting Works. It's a really cool job. It's where you get in a truck and trailer, you drive it up and down the West Coast. You work at these great clubs, you build on site, and you give our consumers the tour experience." And the guy who was approached about the job before he wasn't qualified to accept the position. So he gave Steve my number. Steve called me. We had a few interviews, and he said, "We'd love to have you come do this job." So I started doing that. And at that time, I was living in Carlsbad, and I was in and out of the office a bunch. And that's how I got to meet Bob. And Bob is, legendary. Even at that time, I mean, I saw stuff on the shelves and he was legendary. And I kind of walked up with my tail between my legs and, it was like, "Hey, Mr. Vokey, can I ask you a question?" And Bob he was always so great. He'd say, "Yeah, anything you need, kid, come on in." And he exposed me to his tour department and to his crew and everybody there, and said, "Hey, whatever this guy needs, get him whatever he needs, and teach him everything you can." And as that time went on, and I was working up and down the West Coast with Glenn Mahler, um, I did some tour events in between, and Bob would come out and we'd work together. And I just kind of mirrored him and watched him do his thing. And every chance I had to do something for him, I would do it, jump on it. And that's really how our relationship started. Is we were coworkers. He was a bit of a mentor, even though he didn't know it yet. But I sort of just followed him around and took as many little tidbits as I could. And then 2.5 years in, he said, "Hey, I need a full-time guy on the tour, and I think you'd be a great fit for that." And I didn't hesitate. I said, "Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it." And it took about 6 or 8 months until things really kind of firmed up on that. And I kind of thought the position had already been filled because it took so long.
Mm.
And so I let that thing go. And then one day he just called up and he said, "Okay, let's do this. I need you to get back down here in Southern California." And so my role, basically, I've been doing this job on tour since 2007, and it's been an incredible journey for me. I've loved doing it. It makes gets me out of the house. I travel all over the country, and I'm sometimes internationally. But my role every week is a director's role where I go out on tour 40 weeks a year, 3 or 4 days a week, and I make sure that our tour players have the best wedges in the game, and kind of help them prepare and do what they need to do. We're fortunate to have a great tour van and staff on the van, but basically that's my goal every single week, is to help these guys prepare and give them the short game tools they need to be successful.
Aaron, when we're getting into it just a little bit, I mean, what are some of the biggest misunderstandings when it comes to wedges, and maybe in design, use, or fitting?
Yeah, I would say that one big misunderstanding is that you can just go into a shop and buy whatever you want. I think, when you look at golf equipment, there's 14 clubs in the bag, and we're always focused on finding the driver that fits us the best. And when you really look at all those clubs, they all need to be fitted. Wedges especially need to be fitted because they are so much more than just full clubs. They are short game clubs. They're bunker clubs, into the grain clubs. They have these values that we may not even know yet. So I always tell guys, "Hey, if you're going to go out and make an investment into golf equipment, especially wedges, make sure you either get a fitting with a PGA professional or at a facility that has all the tools, and really expose yourself to what's out there. I think fitting is really a key thing for for success when you're picking out equipment.
So you mentioned fitting, so this sort of ties into the next question. Then I think everybody on here would certainly love to hear. And again, everybody, put your questions in the chats here as well. What you would, your description of a good wedge fitting would be, sort of how the process would go from start to finish with someone and doing it correctly.
Yeah, so for me, I need to learn as much as I can in a short amount of time. So I'm in the bag, I'm pulling out the gamers, I'm looking at the faces, I'm looking at the bounces, I'm looking at everything I can: shaft, length, grip, swing weight, uh, the head shape, anything and everything I can. And I'm trying to bring in all these notes and really get a deeper understanding. Then I start asking questions. Tell me about your golf course. Is it firm? Is it soft? What kind of grass do you play in? Most guys, they may not know that, but they would be able to tell you. It's grass that grows up or it grows down. Blades are thick or thin. The soil has a lot of sand or no sand. And then I'll ask them questions about the bunkers. I'll ask them questions about their ball flight. Is it right to left, left to right? So I'm throwing questions at them. The more answers I have as we're doing this fitting process, the more uh, the, uh, the more able I am to make a good decision on the direction we're going to go in. Because I think it's really easy to just go, hey, here's middle of the road, 10-degree bounce on all your stuff. Have a good day. Go have fun. But that fitting process it really, really is an important thing. And so I'm asking these questions, I'm getting these answers. Once we start hitting shots, I'm trying to kind of expose these guys to different things, but also educate them at the same time about the little things that matter. Carry numbers. Are you guys hitting the wedges the distances they need to travel? Do you have some that go too short or too far? So we're tying up those carry numbers. Understanding the values of the soles. So a good example would be if I was working with Justin Thomas, I'd say, hey, does your pitching wedge go 10 to 12 yards shorter than your 9-iron?
Okay,
We're
that's
figuring out those things. And then we're also looking into bounces and soles and why those make a difference. So, if you're a 46, 50, 58, 54, 58 guy, we know pretty well that 46 and 50 tend to be just full shot clubs or extensions of the iron set. So it's pretty simple there. It's either more or less bounce. Once we start to increase the loft, then we're really starting to dig deep into the value of those wedges, what you do with them, where you use them, and why. And then sometimes there are little things that we do with our guys where we say, hey, if you're not using your 54 or your 56 very much around the greens, I encourage you to do so because it is a more consistent play when you're playing into grainy conditions like we do in Florida quite a bit. So, it's this process of me as the fitter, or you guys as the fitters, learning as much as you can and pulling as much of that information out of your players you can, but also subtly feeding these little tidbits that will help them be better in the end and exposing them to things that maybe they're not paying attention to. So, you know, learn what they have, ask a lot of questions, gap fit, soul fit, and then build a matrix that makes sense. Don't give them the same bounces across the board unless they truly need it. Give them some options if they are short game savvy. Give them some different things that they can get to know, and I think you'll expose their game to a few shots that they may not even realize they had.
Very cool. We got a couple questions on the board, so we'll hit those to kind of tie those in here, Aaron. Joe's asking, do you do a lot with TrackMan? And if so, is the wedge height with tour player wedges around 40 or does it vary?
So I use TrackMan sometimes. I think there's a lot of really cool gadgets and gizmos out there right now, a lot of great technology, and the TrackMan is a great tool. But I try and keep guys instinctive. I think as golfers, we all learn how to play this game without all that stuff, and we became good wedge players without all those things. So I bring out the TrackMan to validate carry numbers. I also bring out the TrackMan to discuss spin numbers and launch numbers. And the reason why I do that is guys go, hey, I'm not spinning him very well, and I don't understand why. And my first instinct is you're hitting him high. And when guys are hitting the ball high, anything above 33 degrees on the launch angle, that spin number is going to drop down. So they've increased the loft naturally on the face, ball slide and skids. It goes higher, but it spins less because you're not getting good compression off the face. So, you go out on the PGA Tour and you look at those launch numbers, you realize that those guys are launching their wedges anywhere between 26 and 30 degrees.
Mm.
And that's why their spin numbers are so high, anywhere in the 10.5 to 11,000 range on those 56 through 62. So, those are the numbers we aspire to hit. I know it's hard for a lot of us. It's hard for me. But those are kind of the numbers that we're looking for. And when I use that TrackMan, I use those numbers to tell that story.
Uh, Aaron, would we talk about the fitting process a little bit? There's a lot of variables, and one of them is a lie angle, which I feel like is a pretty important one here. So, and Jeremy's got a question on here too. Do you think that most players tend to fit into flatter lie angles with wedges versus their irons?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I think, and you'll see this a lot on tour. We see this often where a guy he'll have different lie angles throughout the bag, and he'll wonder why that is. And one of the things I try and tell these guys is that, hey, all these clubs are different, right? Your wedges don't need to be like your irons. Your irons don't need to be like your 3-wood. They need to do exactly what it is that they need to do. Whatever you want them to do is what they should be. So I try not to get these guys fixated on the numbers. I would say if you're looking for the simple way to do it, I would say whatever your pitching wedge is, work off that. If you feel like your ball flight is too right to left, um, bend it a little flatter. I would say that most guys on tour are right around 64 degrees. I have players that are 59 degrees, which is 5 flat, and I have players that are 68 degrees, which is 4 degrees flat. Some of that is height specific. The guy who's 4 degrees upright is a pretty tall guy, and the guy who's 5 flat is on the shorter side. But I do have some taller guys who are flatter too. So I would say, if anything, the best way to handle your lie angles is to really understand what you want your ball flight to look like, hit shots, and bend to those numbers until you get that ball flight that really makes sense. I would say, again, most guys are right around 64, which is a standard lie angle for us, and I think that's a big reason why 64 is what we call our standard lie. Is we need kind of a sweet spot for most guys. And I run a study every year, just kind of seeing if there's a trend. Again, 64 is that kind of middle of the road ground, but I would say understand what you want your ball flight to look like and match that wedge flight to it, and don't put so much thought into those numbers. They'll make you mental at the end of the day. Most guys would on the PGA Tour, I would say, are straight to slightly draw bias on those shots anywhere outside of 60 yards. And on the greenside shots, they're manipulating the faces to eliminate some of that curvature. They're choosing spots downrange. I was with a player yesterday, actually, and we were discussing lie angles in relation to shots around the greens inside 20 yards and kind of what they're looking for. And these guys are like, well, I just manipulate the wedge here and there inside these 20-yard shots because I can adjust that lie based on what I want. I need it downrange on the longer shots, but when I'm 20 yards and in, I just can lift up the heel a little bit or lift up the toe a little bit, and I can change that. I'm really more interested in making sure that my flight's right. So, your window's going up and down, but being able to hit those target spots downrange, because a lot of tour players will tell you, like, I'm just picking a spot on the green where I want to land this ball and then know that it's going to release to the hole or around a target.
Cool. Very cool. Aaron, Mark Lynch is asking a question, and Mark, I'm going to read the question, and if I don't ask it correctly, because I want to make sure I'm asking it, you can unmute your mic and chime in. But he's asking, how quickly do you see folks needing to change bounce and grind when we work from a higher launch angle to a lower launch angle? I'm assuming he means maybe from gap wedges and then down into your high lofted wedges, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So we'll start with the stronger lofted stuff. Those typically will launch lower right out the gate because you've got less loft. Anytime we start to see weird flights, it tends to really be more around the higher lofted wedges, because it's, again, you're getting less interaction between the ball and the face. Guys rarely tell me, like, hey, I'm really struggling with my pitching wedge through my 52. They typically won't say that, because with that less loft, they're making good contact. Their ball and their face are really kind of doing good stuff. Once you start to see them creep into those 54, 56, 58 and higher, that's when you start to see the inconsistency of the ball doing some unusual things. So, over the years of studying since like 2010, when we had to make this groove rule change, we learned that bounce influences trajectory sometimes. And there are a handful of ways that we can see guys lower that ball flight. First way, obviously, is loft. You can change loft, ball flight's going to come down. And again, that rule of, hey, less loft, better contact, better spin numbers, lower launch windows, that helps, number one. Number two, we can do by increasing bounce. That'll move your strike location lower on the face. And this is all through fitting, of course. If you tell a guy, hey, go out and get a fit, he can hit these different shots and he'll be able to tell you, oh, okay, I get that. If I increase the bounce, the strike's going to move down the face. The initial launch angle's lower, so I'm now in that lower window. My spin number's going back up again. And then the other way, if a guy is, he's a good player, but he's struggling to flight it, his hands are good, he shallows out at the bottom. Sometimes going to something with a thinner sole, like an L grind, an A, sometimes a T grind, anytime where you could move more mass towards the face of the sole, you can, decrease more of that dynamic lofting effect you'd see when you get into some of those bigger soles. So those would be a handful of ways. And then technique, obviously, if you guys are working with somebody and, you're doing some coaching, having guys have less dynamic loft really moves around how they deliver that wedge. If a guy loses the angle of the club face as he's coming in, he's going to throw it up higher. The higher it launches, less it's going to spin, and the shorter it will carry. So, there's a technical side as far as, your physical action, and then, choosing a bounce, either whether it be a thinner sole for somebody who's shallow or a little bit wider sole to move that strike down. Those certainly will help. And then the loft.
Cool. Aaron, you mentioned earlier on about not fitting people across the board with the same bounce angles. And my boy Don Slobodnik from over at my place at Nighthawk is asking, do you recommend using same bounce in a lot of your wedges? Just explain that, why it's not necessarily a uniform thing across the board, because we do get some people who don't go through the fitting process. They get their loft wedges and they just buy all the same one. And we
Yeah.
know that maybe isn't necessarily the case that's needed.
Yeah, I would say that's so common. And I think when you look at our sales numbers, sometimes, I go to these meetings sometimes and they go, okay, let's go over the sales numbers. And they go, okay, the highest sellers for 5208, 5610, and 6008. And I go, okay, well, that makes sense, because those are all middle of the road bounces. It's really easy to walk into a shop not knowing what you're shopping for and just kind of give me the stuff in the middle. It's a really safe way of doing things. But as far as the fitting process goes, and this is why I encourage anybody who wants to invest in new wedges, take a second, go and try something if you have the time, or go to a resource that can kind of help you through that process, because fitting is really important. And the reason why is that when you look through the bag, you look at the driver and you go, oh, I want to fit that driver. The driver has its solitary flight, right? It has the flight that's best for you. And it's usually the best for most people. There's a launch number and a spin number that make perfect sense for you based on your ball speed, right? But that's really all it does, is you're just trying to maximize the distance and the carry. The irons, those are going to go certain numbers. You got to figure out what your numbers are. So making sure your arches are good there. But once you get into those wedges, you begin to realize that wedges are more complicated than anything else, because they do more than anything else. They are, manipulated to create loft, decrease loft, increase spin, take spin away, go high, go low, do all these crazy things. And if you give somebody the same bounces and sole style.
Nope. Aaron, you still there? Frozen in time.
Or like, why did you choose these
Okay.
bounces?
Sorry,
You
Aaron, we
there?
lost you there for a second.
No worries, no worries. So we'll have players. I'm not sure what y'all heard of that, but we'll have players that will come in, and they'll come in with several of the same wedges. And I'll ask the question right away, how did you come up with this matrix? And they'll go, I don't know, I just thought they looked cool. And I immediately tell them, hey, that's the wrong answer. There's got to be a reason why you're choosing these things. A great example, and I've told the story many a times, is JT Poston. He's a stud that plays on the PGA Tour. Great kid, real tall, lots of ball speed, good short game. And he comes in and he brings in, 3 of the same sole styles. And I asked him that question. He said, I don't know. They're just in the bag. And I said, well, today we're going to figure out why. And, we went through this test and we realized he didn't have enough bounce in the sand wedge. He had too much bounce in the lob wedge. He was limited on the styles of shots that he could hit. And that's one of the things I tell our tour players is, hey, these wedges are meant to be used everywhere. Let's build you a matrix of wedges with different bounces and sole styles that open up a few new shots. And that's part of that process, is giving these guys that chance to hit the shots that maybe they're not comfortable hitting, or make a few shots they're not comfortable hitting better.
Aaron, you talked about spin and all that, and I think an interesting question we could ask you, because we're all sort of teaching and club fitting and selling, and part of sometimes the hard part is you don't want to over push and try and push somebody to buy new clubs, but some of our students and members have wedges that are clearly just toast, like they're losing a ton of spin. So make the case, like, how do we make the case for the spin deterioration and make them say, hey, look, you need to get in here because you're costing yourself strokes more than you think.
Sure. Okay. So I'll tell you this. On the tour, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4 rule. 1 pitching wedge, 2 gap wedges, 3 sand wedges, and 4 lob wedges. That's what we consider to be kind of our rule on the PGA Tour. It varies from player to player. Some guys like a new wedge every week. Some guys play one for 6 to 8 months. But I would say those stronger lofted wedges will maintain their spin for quite some time. So 46 through 52, those are going to hold spin for quite a while. Once you increase that loft again, when that loft starts to move this way, that ball and that face are not going to create a lot of good contact over time. As you wear those faces down in bunkers, practice, whatever it may be, you're going to see those spin numbers start to drop off. And there are 3 things that we notice right away. Carry number is going to go shorter. Our ball flight's going to go up, and our spin numbers are going to decrease, not only in flight, but also downrange. You'll be able to see it. And that's, I think, one of the cool things with AMs is that when you give them a new wedge, they hit a shot and they go, why is my ball flight so low? And they go, why is it stopping so fast? And they go, oh, this is really cool again, and they kind of forget that experience. So, trying to get those guys to change more often certainly helps. But I would tell guys, hey, keep an eye on that ball flight. If the ball's going a little higher, carrying a little shorter, and it looks visually like less spin down range, yeah, it's probably a good time to make a switch. And I would say it's really more around that 56 through 62 range. And that's where you're going to see that spin decay really start to take place. And then you can look at the faces too. Honestly, if there's good wear on that face, that strike pattern, you'll be able to tell right away, like, hey, this has been here for a while. It's maybe time for a freshie.
Aaron, we got a question on the board here from Mike Vanchero. What percentage of tour players have grind preferences beyond the stock offerings? Do the majority of them prioritize versatility around the greens, or have a specific purpose for each wedge separate from full swing yardage? So first part's about the grind.
That's a great question. I would say maybe 20% of guys are ultra custom. So the majority of players will find wedges that they love. A Jordan Spieth, a Justin Thomas, and Adam Scott. Those guys will find 4 wedges that they love, and they'll play those same 4 wedges unless a major venue shift occurs. Like if you go from the Honda in West Palm Beach to the sand, anywhere in the sand belt in Australia, where it goes from real grainy sandy to hard as a rock, fescue kinds of grasses, that's a massive shift in conditions. So guys will typically stay in the same 4 unless those changes happen. You'll see a lot of guys make changes around Augusta, and you'll see a lot of guys make some big changes around, say, a British Open maybe. So those would be times. And then there are certain occasions where, they'll just feel out of place. Maybe there's a coaching difference. Maybe there's a swing change or whatever it may be. And we'll make some changes based on that. But most guys will find a stock offering, and those 20% of guys will make something custom.
Aaron, how hard is it? I asked you this question when you came on with my students about last year, and I asked you, how hard is it to change technology in wedges?
Oof, man, it is tough. It is so hard. That's one of the challenges that we go through every year in our design process, and how we, the things we talk about. we're talking every day. I talk with Kevin Sistro, Ron Hettinger, Bob Vokey, Corey Gerard, our team here, which is really a small team. But we have these meetings and we sit around and we go, okay, what's next, and why? And this feedback, this valuable feedback that we're bringing in, comes from our tour players, and what we call the pyramid of influence. But it also comes from players like you guys. You guys are sharing this valuable information about what works and, more importantly, what doesn't. And so we have a pretty good understanding, we think, of direction we want to go in, but trying to get there is really tough because we're up against the wall of cost. And this, the saying is, the juice worth the squeeze? Do we want to invest a lot of money into something that brings minimal returns? Because we don't want to scare anybody away. Anybody who plays our products, we want to keep them on board. We want to keep them using our stuff. And so for us, it is very, very tough because the USGA and RNA have done an amazing job of keeping a close eye on score lines and making sure that we don't get too spinny. So we have to follow those guidelines, but trying to find technology that makes sense and makes it a little bit easier for us and makes us better is a challenge. But we seem to figure out how to do it every couple of years. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but we're getting better every time.
What's your thought on shafts and fitting? Because this is something that comes up when we fit all the time. Some students are like, "Oh yeah, I'll just get them all the way through lob wedge, same as my irons." Others are
Hmm.
are different. So what do you see out there? And then what would you say for maybe for the average golfer? Maybe some thoughts there too about shafts and wedges.
Yes. So it's a great question because I think a lot of people are really curious. Do I have the right shaft in my wedge? I know shafts are really important in irons and woods. So in wedges, there are two routes you can go. If you are the kind of player that's a little bit slower ball speed, you might be a senior player or a female player, whatever it may be, or maybe just even for kids. I think this is a great conversation to have about, maybe you're raising a young golfer and you want to get those guys started. If your ball speed's a little slower, you have a little less tempo or club head speed, whatever's in the irons, you can extend those into the wedges. That's perfectly fine. Now, once you start getting into those players that are higher ball speed, like your tour players or your better Rams or anybody, who's got ball speed, above 170-ish, 165, that's when you start to see that shaft deflect and move a lot. And so in situations like that, I tell those players, all right, let's look at your set matrix. You're 46, 50, 54, 58 player. What do you have in the irons now? Oh, I'm using Project X 6.5s. I'd say, great. Take that Project X 6.5, put it in the 46, put it in the 50. Let's stop right there for a second. Let's talk about the 54. What do you do with it? Well, I use it around the greens a little bit, and I like it in the bunker, and I hit full shots. Perfect. Okay. So this is where that split begins. We got to figure out what that wedge is used for. If it's a full shot club all the time and that's it, then you can put the same shaft in. That's fine, because really the shaft is meant to stabilize that head, create some consistency, manage flight and spin. But if we start to slow down that club, we want to help create that feel. We need more feel as we start to slow it down because we're not loading that club as much or that shaft as much. So I'll tell guys, put whatever's in the irons in the 46 and the 50. And then as you get in that 54 and that 58, start to soften things up a little bit and create a little more feel. Maintain the weight. So keep that shaft anywhere from 120 to 130, and maybe go from an X to an S and soften things up so that when you are greenside, you do have some feel. So a good example would be, we'll go with somebody like Jordan Spieth. Jordan Spieth plays Project X. He plays it actually in all of his wedges. He's always been that way, but he does go softer in the lob wedge, and he does it because he needs that feel. Justin Thomas is the same way. He's X1 in the pitching wedge, and he's S4 and everything else. So you can tell he's going a little bit softer as he starts to get into those clubs where he slows things down. And I think that rule really applies to anybody with those higher ball speeds. I think it's a really intelligent way to choose shafts. And then the other thing is just pick things that feel right. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the complicated thoughts of, I need a specific shaft for my wedges. And at the end of the day, I think if you find something that feels really good, you can't go wrong with that. It really, the softer stuff tends to be the stuff that feels great. And it makes a lot of sense for wedge play. Go a little softer.
Aaron, will in your experience, will the shaft uh, flex, especially when we talk about getting into some of those higher lofted ones? Can that, if it's not correct, maybe that's not the correct way to ask it, but will it affect how the club enters the ground for a single player? Do you understand what I'm asking? Like if it's too stiff or too soft, will it affect how the sole and the leading edge interact with the ground?
It can for sure. So let's say that you are using a 60-degree uh, from the fairway, full shots. Let's say you're hitting it 90 yards, whatever, and you're using a really soft shaft. Yes, it will. If you're too soft, it will deflect offline. It will get droop, or it will get lag, and it can change lie angle. It can change the way that club enters the ground. Um, those are important conversations to have with anybody you're fitting, or even you getting a fitting. Is asking yourself that question: Am I swinging this so hard that I don't have enough stability in this? Is this the right shaft for me? It can change those things on full shots. Most guys would tell you, I don't swing my 60-degree or my 58-degree, whatever it is. I don't swing it that hard. And I would tell most players, once you get into those higher lofts, they should never exceed 85% of your speed. You should swing a little bit slower. Um, that will help you not only maintain and manage that lag, but it also help keep your spin numbers high and your ball flights down. Anytime you start swinging faster, the ball will typically go up because your hands are catching up with the club head at impact, and guys are seeing it launch a little higher. So a little bit slower tempo usually helps. If guys do swing hard, yeah, you probably need to think about something a little more stable.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you have a preference? Not a preference, maybe, but a one of the pieces of fitting we talk about, bounce and grind and lie angle and all of it. Is there one in particular that maybe people get mostly wrong that they really need to pay more attention to? I always feel like it's lie angle to
Mm.
some degree with people, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I could go down a rabbit hole of bad choices. But
We
yeah,
got
I
time.
think, for me, I'm really biased. I mean, I think that everything wedge related is important. I think choosing the right loft is really important, and the right bounce and soles. But if I had to choose one thing that's really, really important, I'd say loft and lie is critical in creating good contact and good direction and dispersion. Um, I tell most guys, like, hey, your ball flight should be straight to slightly, and when I say slightly, just a few feet or maybe a yard of curvature from right to left. Guys who typically cut it are hitting it a little higher with less spin, and it's coming up a little shorter. And you go out on the range at these tour events and you watch these guys and you go, man, that ball looks so good. It's straight to slightly draw bias. That's how these guys manage that lower ball flight, that launch angle we talk about, which is like that sweet spot of 26 to 30 degrees. That's how they keep the spin numbers above 10,000. So they've got great stopping power, but they're also exposing that golf ball to the elements when they throw it up in the air really high. I understand sometimes those shots are important, but um, we try and tell these guys, hey, let's try and make the path to the hole as easy as possible. However, we need to do that. And a lot of times it's keeping it on that little lower ball flight. So, those lower ball flights again will help you hit those carry numbers easy. You'll get good spin numbers, but it's a really, really consistent way to get to your target faster.
Are you seeing the players who the ones who do cut it? Are you typically seeing them with deeper divots, deeper attack angles to do it, or not?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can. Again, this is there is a physical aspect to what we see in ball flight. So we have some guys that are a little over the top at times. Those guys bring that club over and across their bodies, and that can have, with an open face, that cut bias flight a little bit higher as well. They have a two-way miss. Unfortunately, they've got these pulls and these cuts. Tour players are really more down that line, which is, I think, a good place for us all to strive to want to be. And it shallows us out too. But certainly those guys on tour who have that more cut bias ball flight can be a little bit steeper in their divots.
Joe is asking a question here on the chat. What drove the decision to offer the M grind in more lofts?
So that's actually a great question. Part of my role is doing this whole wedge thing with Bob is to understand and learn from our partners around the world. We had the M grind 50 and 52 for a long time. The M grind is actually an old club. It's modified over the years, but it started a long time ago with Bob, and he would say it's one of his most favorite grinds. And we had some tour players who were playing in firmer conditions, like different venues in the UK, or Scotland or Australia, and these guys would say, "Hey, I manipulate my 50 and 52 around the greens a lot. I'm using the ground more, but I really struggle with some of the wider, higher bounce offerings you guys have in your line. What can we do to alleviate some of that?" And so Bob, like he always does, and how I've learned to do it is we just grind on stuff until we get to a place where we're comfortable, and that's really how the birth of the 50M and 52M really came to life. Was just working with tour players, listening to them, and creating something that they feel they need. And this is just something we've done over the years. And right now we're finding that the European tour, our partner Will Harvey, who does kind of my job over there on the European tour, he said, "Hey, we're finding that our conditions are firming up quite a bit, and we have a lot of players that are needing a little bit less bounce or a little bit less material on the back of the wedge as they open up the face on these 50 and 52s. Can we do something?" And we were doing it on our stock SM8 parts, on our 08s and our 12s. And we realized, hey, you know what? We could do this as a stock offering. So that's really how that part came back to life.
Gotcha. Aaron, can you maybe just share a little bit, if possible, just maybe a few of the tour players, maybe what their setups are, bounce and grind and stuff, JT and Spieth, Adam Scott, to just name a few, just kind of giving everybody an
Sure.
idea of what they're carrying and maybe some of the variability between them.
Yeah. So I'll give you JT, Jordan, and Adam. I think those are three great examples. They all play 4 wedges. Um, they all play a Vokey pitching wedge. And if you guys haven't tried a Vokey pitching wedge, you have got to try a Vokey pitching wedge. They are so good. But we'll start with Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas has kind of a crazy set. And if you guys have seen the photos I posted on Instagram or anything like that, or anything on Vokey.com, he's got kind of a wild makeup of different bounce number, or not different bounce numbers, but different loft numbers. And this all came from trial and error. And again, if you guys are going out and you're fitting yourselves, you're getting fit, or you're fitting somebody, sometimes those numbers aren't really all that important. A lot of times I sit meetings like, can we just take all the numbers off and just put P, G, S, L, whatever, but so JT, he plays a 4610 at 47. He plays a 5212 at 52 and a half. He plays a 5614 at 57, and he plays a 60T at 60.5. And so, you look at those numbers, you go, man, that's complicated. There's a lot going on in there. And that's just trial and error of working with the TrackMan and finding that sweet spot, understanding like, okay, these are the numbers I want to hit it, and bending them to those numbers and then bringing them to me and having me say, okay, here are your new Lofts and Lies. They're kind of funky. Do you want to change anything? And he just goes, no, these are perfect. Just keep making them like they are. And he's been like that forever. And that allows me to be really creative in how we stamp and the fun things we get to do, and to tell his story. That at the end of the day, the numbers really aren't as important as really the performance you get. He's an X100 in the pitching wedge, S400 in the 52, 56, and 60 heads. Standard length, tour velvet cord, 60 round, label down, 1 wrap. He's a half-degree upright on all, with his specialty lofts. So that's basically his setup at standard swing weight. So D3, D3, D5, D5. Kind of a really simple, easy guy to work with, in the sense that if you make him what he's looking for, there is no problem. He just says, hey, I need a new lob wedge. Great. Here you go. Perfect. Thanks. Bye. And he goes on your place. Jordan Spieth, same way. Jordan has been loyal to the same 4, again, using a Vokey pitching wedge. 4610, all raw parts. Again, all these guys use raw. So 4610 for Jordan, 5208 at 52, 5610S at 56, and he uses a 60T at 60. Where his set's a little different is he's Project X, 6.5 in the pitch and the gap, and the sand wedge, and he goes a little softer in that lob wedge again to increase that feel. And again, that's a really, really intelligent way to go about it. Is he wants a little more feel green side. He's a little limited if he goes into something real stiff. So he wants to go a little bit softer in that. Again, very little changes. You make him the same stuff. and he's very, very happy. Standard lofts and lies, standard length, super stroke, grip, round, big S up, one wrap, standard swing weights is, kind of as basic off the shelf as you can get. And then Adam's a little bit different, and Adam is, you talk about somebody who's got some incredible feel. I love working with Adam. In fact, Adam, before he went to Torrey Pines this week, he came out to Oceanside. We got to spend some time with him, and he just put on a clinic out there. And we had a discussion about bounce, and this is a kind of a really cool topic. This is why I want to save him for last. We had a discussion about bounce. We had a discussion about why he was having issues with trajectory and how do we fix it. And I explained to him, like I explained to you guys, like, hey, there are certain ways to do it. We can do it with loft, we can do it with bounce. And he goes, I don't understand. And I said, I'll be right back. And I went out and I grabbed a couple things and I said, okay, blindly try this. Tell me what you feel, tell me what you hear, and let's look at what the result is. And he'd hit a shot with his gamer and it'd go up a little higher, and the spin numbers would change a little bit. And then I'd hand him another wedge and he'd hit it and it'd start to come down a little bit more. And he'd go, ooh, that's interesting. And his spin number would creep up a little bit now. So now he's lost, degree and a half of launch and his spin numbers are going back up. And I said, okay, now hit this one. And now his ball flight goes like this, goes down to about 27. And his spin numbers go way up. And now he's in that 27, 11,000 range. And he goes, oh my gosh, what is this? I got to have this. So that's part of that process, is understanding, like, okay, why do you need it? How's it going to help you? And so going back to the specs for Adam, Adam is as cool and as old school as you can get. And when I say that, he's looking for things that Champions Tour players still look for, which is, offset, what we call hook in the power area, which is where we polish out this little section just before the grooves start inside the heel. And so he's a 48-10 guy. He's a 52-12 polished to 10 degrees bounce. So 52-10 on the bounce, 56-10S. And he's just switched this week to a 60-12D from a K grind. So again, more forward bounce to help with that ball flight, to keep the ball down and keep that spin number high. So the other thing that's cool about his set is he likes the shafts a little firmer, a little bit less dispersion for him, a little more stability down below. He's using a Dynamic Gold AMT White X100 tipped 1/2, so a 36.5-inch blank part. Standard length, Tour Velvet grips, 2 wraps, 58 round, label down, standard swing weights. But he likes a little hook. He likes a little offset. He likes a little, he likes a little funk, which is super cool. It's very, very different than what we see from some of our younger modern day JT, Jordan, Zalatoris. These guys are looking for different stuff, looking for, that sleeker, straighter, less offset kind of stuff, which is cool because I get that challenge. I love it. So 3 great examples of guys who do different things and have different reasons and different processes. Yeah, it's basically it on the specs.
No, that's really cool. It's just really interesting to hear what the difference is. One question that came up is sort of, and this may be more in sort of the sales and production side a little bit, but I am curious about this one too, Aaron. And that is, why is it that it's not possible to order stuff flatter than 2 degrees? We see this in the irons, and I think in the wedges too. You can't order anything flatter than that. Is there a reason for that in particular?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't speak on their behalf, but if I was to say the reason, I would say it would come down to probably issues with durability in the parts. When I say durability, there'd be no fear of a break or a crack or anything like that. It's more like, when you guys order something with this beautiful finish on it, we don't want to damage that finish. And I think 2 degrees is kind of that sweet spot where you're not near even getting close to doing that. But that's kind of, I guess, maybe their comfort level. I know for us on tour, I'll give you great examples here. We have a couple players who love offset. I'll bend offset. Have you ever bent any offset, Mark?
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Not
So
anytime recently.
so it's kind of a hard thing to do. And so you take a head, right? This thing is sitting inside the fixture and in the Loft and Lie machine, and you grab this bending bar and you grab it as low as you can down here and you pull it this way. And when I say you pull it, I'm pulling it 10 to 12 degrees. So
Mm.
what was once a 48 is now a 60. And so I'm pulling this thing down 10 to 12 degrees, and then I grab it up high and I pull it back to its original loft or whatever the loft is, and that creates that beautiful shapely offset. And then we have a polishing process in which we polish even more. And so for some of those guys who love that, like an Adam Scott, uh, those guys require it. They need it. It's just that visual connection they have with that club. We have to bend that in physically and then polish it after the fact. And so for us, we know it's not an issue of damaging that head. Yes, 10 to 12 degrees will there's a good chance you could damage it, but for us, we've gotten so good at it over the years that we don't have that problem. But I think really for us, it's maintaining the beauty of the product. Um, Certainly, if somebody had to bend it more, they could. But I think it's just making sure that whatever you guys get is in perfect shape.
Gotcha. Gotcha. A real quick reminder for everybody before we wrap up here in a minute with Aaron, just a reminder to put your name and PGA number back in the chat again so we can verify the attendance and all that good stuff. So fire it in there while we're hitting this. And if you have any last second questions here, throw it in. Aaron, I do want to ask you, talking about bending and all that fun stuff, um, for any of the folks on here who like to try and do their own stamping, because
Hmm.
obviously you're very good at it. Any advice for anybody on here on sort of stamping kits and ways to do it really well, from the home garage?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. Because I know I use stamping's really become popular, and I get a lot of questions about it. Um, I would say you're going to need a handful of things. Are you there, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay. You're gonna need a handful of things for for stamping. You're gonna need a base in order to stamp on. And for a lot of guys, they ask like, okay, what do you think the best base is? There are magnetic bases you can buy online. I can't give you a spot of where to find them because we make our own in house. But there are some businesses that will sell those for you. You can get something as simple as a vise, a table mounted vise that has that flat section on it. Put a little piece of thin leather on there to protect the face. You can stamp right there. You can do it on an edge of a table if it's a good solid base. So you need a solid base to work off first. You're gonna need a heavy mallet, anywhere between a 3 and 4 pound short, kind of stumped handled mallet.
Mhm.
I like to go into like Home
God
Depot or
damn it.
Lowe's and kind of
Easy. You still there, Aaron?
yeah, I'm here.
Good.
I like to go into a Lowe's or a Home Depot and I like to kind of feel my way through the handles. You guys could do the same, but something short, 3 to 4 pounds. A good stamping kit. This will last you quite a while. If you're not stamping as much as I am, it should last you guys a long, long time. You can do your buddy stuff. You could do, your member stuff, whatever. And there's a couple of good brands. There's Young Brothers. They make great stamps. You can find those on Amazon. There's also Prior stamps. They're come in a red case. I use this on the trailer. Another great set. Again, both sets I think you can find on Amazon. They're anywhere between 75 and 150 bucks. And they'll last you a long, long time. And then paints. I know a lot of guys ask about paints. You can use craft paints. If you go into like a Hobby Lobby or Michaels, whatever, anything acrylic oil based, any of the testers paints you can use. Those tend to dry a little bit harder. You can also use the paint pens, which Sharpie makes. Those are great. Anything like that, they work perfect. And then I would tell guys, get yourself some masking tape and get yourself a couple of old wedges and just hammer them in and get to know it. Because the process while stamping is not difficult. The first few times you do it, it is tricky because you are uncomfortable. It is a little tough to use the hammer and understand how to do it and have that pin rest. How hard do you have to hit? To practice. Don't hit it too hard because you could see it through the face, and don't hit it too soft because you won't be able to find it. There is certainly a sweet spot. But get yourself those tools, practice, get to know how to use the mallet, the pins, and it's fun. You can have a great time. And stamping for me is a little bit therapeutic, I guess. After the hard work's done, which is finding something that these guys need to be successful. I love to go out and tell a story and have some fun and make stamping a personal thing. So I encourage everybody else to do it too. If you guys are too scared to do it, you can certainly go to Voki.com. They have all the stamping resources there. But yeah, that's basically how I started doing it, and I have all my fingers still to this day. So I'm confident you guys can too.
All right, Aaron, one last one here too is how many wedges have you screwed
Yeah.
up doing stamping?
Ooh, you know, not honestly, not very many.
Oh,
I've been
good for you.
fortunate. I mean, over my years and years of doing it, I mean, maybe a dozen. I mean, I've stamped hundreds of them. I'm sure. I couldn't tell you how many, but after the first few, you realize like, okay, this is how you do it. And if you pay close attention to what pin you're pulling, and you're paying close attention to how you're putting it on the part and stamping, it gets pretty natural after time. So, I tell guys again, get some old wedges, find some duds, practice, and certainly don't stamp anything that you love or have in your bag until you feel like you're confident enough to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, before we let you go, just while I have everybody on here, again, PGA number and name in there. And just a reminder, as you'll see maybe in my background as a reminder here, February 1st, our merchandising seminar, really some great information from Matt Fuller and Mike Adkins. February 8th, James Hong. If you teach juniors, he's a master at it and fantastic. So please make sure you join us for that. And then the 15th, guy Aaron, I'm sure knows well, Mark Blackburn's coming on with us
Hmm.
to do ground forces and talk about that. And then on the other side here is March 8th, we have our virtual teaching summit, which is open. Christina's put that on the website, mapga.com. It's a very minimal fee for an amazing lineup of presenters and sponsors. So we're going to have power and speed and golf. So make sure you're signing up and joining for that. PGA Professionals and Associates on that one. Aaron, listen, man, thanks so much for your time and getting up early and jumping on with us West Coast time. We really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough. And be safe and have a great week out at Torrey. I bet your weather's better than a lot of ours.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. It's the sun's out, thank goodness, but it is cold here. Well,
Uh,
I say that respectfully because I
yeah.
don't really know how cold it is.
All right. All right. Well, Aaron, thanks again, man. Everybody take care. We really appreciate you joining and hope you join us for all the other ones. Check them out online here and sign up with the presenter. We appreciate it. Have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
See ya.